All right, guys, and I am here with my lovely, beautiful wife. It's been years. It feels like it's been so long since you were on the stream. Good to see you, babe. How are you doing today?
Good.
Awesome,
Happy to be here.
awesome to have you here as well, guys. We are super excited. Before we get started, okay, people are saying hi, Brittany. Good to see you, Anita, Gita. Awesome to see you guys. We're gonna jump straight into it today, guys. We're gonna talk about marriage under attack, and we're gonna share our story of how we first of all met each other, so that you know our background, our marriage. We just a couple of days ago celebrated our 4th anniversary, and if you didn't know, guys, we announced it everywhere, but if you didn't know, we have a baby brewing. I'm so excited. I have been praying and waiting for this time, so we are super excited. Thank you very much, guys, for joining. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started here. We're gonna share our marriage story really fast here and we will have Q&A at the end, guys. During the stream today, if you have any questions that you want to ask us, whatever it is, we want to be transparent today. Because we are pastors or because we are ministers of the gospel doesn't mean that we don't go through hardship. Our marriage has suffered hardship from time to time. There's been seasons that have been really tough for us, and we're going to share as transparently as possible with you the lessons that we learned from the experiences that we had, and hope that that will help you in some way. And if you have any questions at any point, feel free to drop it in the chat and we will answer those questions at the end of it. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead. Is that okay that I start?
Yeah.
So we're going to share our marriage story here really quickly, and you'll hear it from... We don't need to share 2 times our marriage story. We just share it once, and you can fill me in on the stuff that I miss. So first of all of you know that I was in Nigeria for 9 years. I went there when I was 19. I was a youth pastor in my dad's church, and I went there to pursue the Holy Spirit, get baptized in Holy Ghost and fire, experience the power of God and everything. And I was there for 9 years, and around the 6th year, I think when I had been there for 6 years, around what year did you come to Nigeria?
I mean, the very first time I visited was in 2011, but I came to stay there as a disciple in 2015.
2015. So I had been there already for 7 years by then, and you came then. You were there for almost 2 years, right? And we were both disciples under Prophet TB Joshua, learning a lot about the power of God, learning all those kind of things. And I strongly believe that one of many reasons that God kept me there for so long was so that I would meet you. Because I believe that she is my God-ordained wife and the woman of my life, and that's how we met. We met there. And rest assured, when you're a disciple of Prophet TB Joshua, you are not allowed or you are not encouraged to have any romantic relationships. Basically, what you're told is, while here, focus on the reason why you came here. Most people didn't go to Nigeria to find a husband or a wife, okay? That, most people came there to experience the power of God, get drenched and saturated, permeated in the Spirit of God, see the power of God, and let that be deposited into you. So of course, there were people who engaged kind of in some romantic relationships, expressing their love for each other and everything, but most of the time while being a disciple, that was discouraged. Right. So same for me. I was there 100%, and I had actually already given up on marriage. I did that a couple of years into it, and I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. If I never marry God, I'm ready to pay that price to run for you. So I had kind of like given up on that idea. That didn't mean that, I didn't recognize when a woman was in my room or anything like that, So obviously, as I was in the middle of that time, many times when I was standing in the office of Prophet TB Joshua and my wife was in there too, I would always try, because what I was really good at was like cracking jokes, making people smile and laugh. So when I noticed that she was in the same room with me, when she was in the same room with me in the office there, I would actually like try extra hard to crack jokes and stuff so that she would notice me. Did you notice me?
I mean, yeah, of course I noticed you. I mean, you were the tallest person in the room. But I mean, also I thought that you were really handsome and but of course, like for the same, I went when I was in Nigeria, I was there for the same reason. I went there really with the mindset that I was setting aside my desire to get married in order to pursue my relationship with God and what He had for me. Prior to coming to Nigeria, I had a couple of relationships that didn't work out, and that honestly, in my heart, really kind of just destroyed my idea of marriage and relationships, and I hadn't experienced God's best at that point for me, and so I went to Nigeria really promising God that I was going to pursue Him. And all of the doors just began to open. I mean, it became very clear that this was the direction that God was sending me in. And I truly do believe that, God knows the desires of our hearts, and He knows, what we ultimately want. And so when I had gone there and allowed myself to set aside that desire and truly focus on Him, that God was, behind the scenes bringing all things together. And so I believe that me going to stay there as a disciple, aside from all of the things that I learned and all of the spiritual understanding that I gained while being there, I do really feel like the ultimate purpose was to bring us together, because I do believe that Rikhard is the person that God had planned for me, and we needed a divine way to encounter each other, and I think that God just really ordained that in heaven for us.
Yeah. So for those of you wondering, we removed the chat from the screen so that our faces aren't like cut off halfway, but we still see your chat. Keep commenting, asking questions. We see what you're saying. Frank, good to see you guys. So yeah, and as we were there, many people, this is one of the most common questions that people have been asking, like, were we romantically involved while in Nigeria? We were not. In fact, we spoke only, like, let's say that you were there for 2 years. We probably spoke to each other one-on-one, only you and me, even if it was casually speaking, like greeting or whatever, like, or a 5-minute conversation about the weather or whatever it might have been. We probably didn't speak more than 30 times maybe in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, like, we didn't, our pathways in Nigeria didn't, like, cross over a whole bunch until towards the end, when, like, when I had gone there, I mean, the first year that I was there, I was literally, like, I don't know how to describe it, like, you remember mountain class, like,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe those of you who have been disciples in SCOAN before, if you're watching this later on or whatever, you will remember mountain class. But essentially, like, when I first went there, that was basically what I was doing. I was just, like, I was in a learning season. And he was already 7 years there, like, in the hustle and bustle of everything that was going on. And so, but it was after I was there for about 7 months, I went on my first, like, we used to call them assignments, but like I traveled for a little bit with Prophet TB Joshua's wife, Pastor Evelyn Joshua, and his daughter, and I had the opportunity. I mean, I had some crazy opportunities while I was there, but that was kind of like my first really big thing that I got to be part of. And when I came back, I think that's when things really started to change for me, and I was able to get a lot more involved. I got really more connected in that sense, and so towards the middle to end is when we started having more run-ins with each other, because our various assignments that we were doing began to cross paths. But and I think that first year, probably not so much.
Yeah, and of course, I remember that one particular time we were in a room packing stuff to TB Joshua. Prophet TB Joshua was traveling to, I think it was the US, right?
Yeah, I think,
And so he would travel by that time in a private jet. And me being really close to him, I was like the one packing his bags, preparing everything for him, kind of being his personal assistant. You being an American citizen and also working kind of closely with Prophet TB Joshua and doing office duties and so on.
And like the visa department and stuff like that. So I helped arrange people's like visas to the US, things like that.
So you were doing the logistical part. So we were actually preparing for a trip. And I remember we were packing up like silverware for the private jet in Prophet TB Joshua's private jet storage room. And that was like the first time that we were like kind of alone, and we were actually like talking and having a good conversation kind of, and like laughing a little bit. And actually I think I was actually rude to you or something, or
yeah actually. And the funniest part was, so that whole time I was like surprised. I was like, oh, I can actually really get along with him, because I had seen him, you know, of course, in everything, and he was sort of like, for lack of a better phrase, kind of like one of the head honchos. Like he was really high up there in his connection and stuff like that. So we during that particular time, I was kind of like, oh, I actually really get along with this guy, and it was really fun. And it's hard because in that time too, you're also really guarding your heart, because at that point, like you're not thinking, oh, I'm gonna marry this person, you know, or this I'm gonna date this person one day. You're like, okay, well, yeah, that's great and nice that this person is attractive and we get along, but you pretty much settle in your heart that like that's all it's ever gonna be. So then when we were we had finished packing everything up and whatnot, and we were driving to the airport, and it was just us and a couple of other people. Prophet TB Joshua was not with us at this point. And there was something missing. So we were packing the stuff for the plane, and it turned out that there was something missing. And Rikhard was on the phone with Prophet TB Joshua and decided to blame it on me, and just was totally throwing me under the bus. And I was literally sitting in the back seat. I was looking at him with my jaw to the ground, like, are you serious? You're actually blaming this on me? You are the one who, you should know all this stuff. This is my first time. And it was so funny, because when he hung up the phone, I was like, what on earth did you just say? What did you just do? Why'd you do that? And I got really upset with him, because I'm thinking, now all of this is going to be my fault. I'm never going to be invited to anything like this ever again. And he's like, no. I had to say it was you, because if it was me, I'd get in a whole bunch of trouble. But because you're new, it would be okay. He wouldn't be upset with you. And I was just like, oh, okay. So that was like and he was right. Like I never got in trouble for anything like that. So, but he knew that he would get in trouble. So, I mean, there's just little things like that. So we have these really funny memories together of stuff like that. So, you know, I think to me, those things are really special, because that was during the time when I can't even say we were friends, because you weren't really allowed to be friends, guys and girls. I mean, even girls and girls, because you were there on a mission. Like you had one thing, like you were there to pursue God, and also to just grow in the ministry aspect of things. And so relationships were just not a priority in any way, shape, or form. So we just had a lot of really funny run-ins together.
But of course, I always liked you. I can't say at that point that I like allowed myself to develop romantic feelings, but I was definitely attracted to you. Honestly, even before you joined as a disciple, I mean, you were it. You were... she was the cutest girl there. Like, come on, guys. Of course, like, I wanted to try to, you know, to be on a good side with her, and like, you know, not that I was like flirting with her, but definitely I wanted her to notice me. So you were the cutest one. So I definitely liked to be in your presence, even there. I actually tried to find myself in situations where I would be in the same conversations or in the same room or something with her, because I had a natural attraction and I wanted to like be noticed by her. I wanted her to, because I knew that I was kind of like, I had to some certain degree kind of like succeeded there in terms of like being, you know, gone through the grinding process and stuff, come out on the other side like a gold or something, and like I wanted you to notice me when I was shining a little bit. So
yeah, I have this one specific memory. We were in the office, and I was preparing a message. Prophet TB Joshua had asked me to to prepare a message. Like, I was kind of coming up on my season to preach in front of the church. I don't know if you guys remember from some years past, the evangelists were, like, every Sunday there was a new evangelist preaching. So he had asked me to prepare a message. So I had been, like, preparing this message for, I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a month or two. And I just really was like, man, it's really hard. I'm having a difficult time memorizing all these quotes, because part of the way that you preached in the church was that you had to really memorize your message. And so I was like writing my message, and of course Rikhard was sitting in the office. This is such a rare moment because you were always gone, you know. And he saw that I was doing that, and he was like, "Oh, are you preparing your message?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just, I'm finding it kind of difficult." He's like, "Don't worry." He's like, "It's really super easy." He's like, "You just write your message." He's like, "And then you add the quotes later." And he's like, "And then you just memorize it from there." And I remember thinking, like, okay, that's how you do it. But he was just like encouraging me and like, "You got this." And I kind of thought, maybe I'm like, maybe he's trying to, Christian flirt with me, but not like not make it super obvious. So these are just some really funny little memories that, like, in normal life you probably wouldn't think too much of it, but because it was so, like, I don't want to say that it was not allowed, but like it was just
not encouraged.
Yeah, not encouraged. So just all those little tiny moments were really special, and just memories that we have from that time together.
Yeah. And so then it happened on that in 2017. I had felt in my spirit that it was my time. I had talked to Prophet TB Joshua about it, and I ended up leaving the Synagogue Church of All Nations on good terms with Prophet TB Joshua. Many people that leave there seems to leave like kind of like lying their way or for whatever reason, but I did it the right way. I told him that I felt that God is leading me, and I wanted to go out and check some things, see my family and everything. And shortly after, my mom ended up getting cancer and everything, so it was really God's timing for me to leave. So I was there as a channel of light in my family when my family went through a crisis of my mother developing cancer and so on. But when I left, you left shortly after.
Yeah, it was like almost a month later. So, but I actually had no idea that he was gone, because one thing that people don't realize is that there are so many people there that you don't always realize when someone is gone, and people go in and out all the time because people go on assignments and things like that. So after like a week and a half or 2 weeks, when I realized, okay, he's gone, he's not physically here present at the church, and I had heard he had gone to Sweden. I just thought it was for like a normal trip home. I mean, this brother had been there for 9 years. In my mind, I was like, this guy is a lifer. He's not going home. Nothing's gonna change for him here. So I didn't think anything of it. And then about a month later, some things happened at my at home in the U.S., and my family had written an email to Prophet TB Joshua just to make me aware of some situations, and I actually came home on a very good terms also. Like, I was not sent home. I wasn't in trouble. Like, a lot of people wonder, like, oh, were you sent home? And no, there was just, I had some family things going on at home, and Prophet TB Joshua said, I think you need to go and take care of some stuff at home. Like, this is really important, and go take care of it. And when you've gotten it all taken care of, then you can come back. So I really thought that I was only going to be gone for like a week, just to like wrap some things up. And then a week turned into 2 weeks, and while I was home, like, I really started to feel a shift in my heart, and I could really feel something had changed in my heart while I was home, and I didn't expect it at all. Even when I left, like, I think Prophet TB Joshua, like, when he allowed me to go home, or I say allowed me to go home, but like when I went home, he even told me, he's like, I was leaving the office, and the one thing he said to me is like, will I see you again? And I said, yeah, of course. But he looked at me, he was like, okay. That look of like, yeah, that's what you think, but that's not what's going to happen. And so after the third week of being home, and things in my family didn't quite wrap up, I really just knew in my heart, like, I prayed, and I isolated myself so much because I didn't want to be influenced by my desires. I really wanted to make sure that I was hearing the voice of God, and I felt deeply in my spirit, like, I think it's time to come home. And the confirmation that I got was on a Sunday night, or Saturday night. It was a Sunday morning service in Nigeria. Prophet TB Joshua called me on the phone, and he told me, he's like, you know, Brittany, he's like, I'm praying for you, and I had a vision that you're not coming back. And that was exactly what I needed to hear. He's like, but pray about it and let me know tomorrow what you think. And for me, that was just like, that was the solidifying moment that, okay, I had heard God. You know, my mentor had heard it too, and we were in agreement. So when I called him the next day to let him know that I had decided to stay home, he blessed me, and he said that he's going to be praying for me and all this good stuff. So we had a really good, ended on really good terms, but the funny thing is 1 hour after that, like, at this point in time, I had no concept of Rikhard being home. I assumed he was back in Nigeria. And I had gone to my brother's house afterwards, and within 1 hour we were talking. I was telling about this really great experience that I had when I was living in Nigeria, and I happened to mention Rikhard's name because it was just a by the way thing. It wasn't anything like important. And my brother was like, oh, hey, by the way, did you know that guy, that Rikhard guy from Sweden, that he's at home, and he's at home for good now? And I was like, excuse me, how do you know that? But of course, because we have some of our friends, like in Hungary Gen, who are also disciples and at the Synagogue Church of All Nations, that they had some insider information that I knew nothing of. And so something clicked in my heart, and I just felt this immense desire. Like, I knew, like, I heard this voice in my head, like, you have to reach out to him, you have to connect, like, you have to find out what's going on. And so that night I contacted him through my sister's Facebook, because I didn't have a Facebook at the time. So through my sister's Facebook, I found him, and I reached out, and I was like, hey, this is Brittany. I don't know if you remember me, but I just reaching out because, like, I can't believe that you're home, and, you know, I hope all is well with you. I think I felt really concerned for him. Like, I hope this guy can, like, readapt back to normal life after 9 years of living in this, like, different kind of world, right? I wasn't too concerned for myself because I'd only been there for just under 2 years, but I was really concerned for this guy. So anyways, so the next day he reached out to me, called me on the phone, and we had this really great conversation, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So she's the one that reached out to me, guys. No, I'm just kidding. So as a woman, don't be scared to reach out. If God has ministered to you, or God is leading you, or you feel unction in your heart, you know. Yes, we do believe in the whole thing of a gentleman reaching out and everything, but remember that's if God puts it in your heart, ladies, and you know who the person is, don't be scared to reach out. Don't just wait only but sometimes it's just different kind of situations where it's okay to actually do that.
And I want to like really say this, that I didn't reach out with an intention of like, oh, I'm gonna try to like get this guy to want to date me. It was more like I felt the like a heaviness on my heart, like I have to reach out to this guy, and I knew it was from God. Like I don't know how to explain it. I knew it was from God. And my intentions were really just more along the lines of, I want to just know that he's doing okay. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my natural desires was like, okay, yeah, I remember he was the most handsome guy in the church, you know, but I tried to not let that be any sort of deciding factor. But like, I reached out because I really felt it impressed upon my heart. And because that's not normally me. I don't think that's my MO, if you will. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So
and it was really up to him too. Like, you're the one who was like, hey, you know, how's it going? Can I call you? Mm-hmm. And from there, I mean, yeah, I might have been the first one to reach out to make that connection, but from that point on, I mean, he was always the one. I wasn't
gonna miss this opportunity of this pretty girl who's reaching out to me. So definitely that's how it was. And then after that, of course, I was in Sweden, she was in USA, and kind of fast forward a little bit. We were dating online, we were communicating.
Online, yeah.
Yeah, dating online, as in like FaceTiming, talking, chatting. sending photos, sending memes, sending photos of your food, talking about how was your day and stuff, and it got more and more.
Yeah, we want to clarify that. We actually didn't send like selfies of ourselves. We literally sent photos of what we were doing, places we were at. We weren't like I really just want to clarify that, because we were not those kind of people. We were just like, what are you doing? Oh, take a picture. I'm here at the park with my family. You know, things like that. So it wasn't I want to be very clear, like,
yeah, we didn't send we weren't sending lewd photos to each other, for example, or anything like that.
Very clear
you know?
about that.
And I think that's very important also to understand that that's not the standard that we as Christians should go for ever, no matter what you're going through or whatever. That's not the case. I mean, in fact, I was kind of like praying in my heart and hoping that she would send me a selfie, because we were talking for like a month or 2 months before you sent the first selfie to me. She was sending photos of her niece and nephew or food and stuff. I actually started almost forgetting like how she looked like and stuff. She wouldn't send me a photo. And me being a gentleman, trying to be really, I really wanted to be a gentleman. And to those of us in the chat who knows what it means to be a gentleman, I felt like I couldn't ask her like, send me a selfie. Like I felt like that's so carnal, that's so selfish and everything. And like I was very careful not to push her to do anything that she didn't want to do. And I think that's very important for our ladies out there who are looking for, you know, is this the person that I'm gonna get married to and everything? Use that as a gauge. If the man is asking you to do things or pushing you to do anything that you're not comfortable with, that's a red flag right there. Gentlemen and men of God and the man that God has in store for you, he wouldn't push you to do anything that you're not comfortable with. That is lust that is operating in that person's heart and mind, not love, not a healthy, sound, romantic relationship. So if you're out there and you're like, oh, is this guy the right one? Well, did he push you to do stuff that you didn't want to do? Did he ask you to send you lewd photos? Did he ask you like, hey, send me a photo of yourself right now? You in bed? Let me see a photo of you or whatever. Like all those kind of things. Or he pushes you and like tries to kiss you. You don't want that, but he like keeps doing it or asking you to do stuff for him, pushing the boundaries all the time. That is the red flag. You don't need to look for anything else. You can be like, oh, well, we both fell. We do. No, forget about that. If you're a lady, if the guy is pushing you to do those things, that's not you and you are, because this is how women are wired. So I hope I'm not going to offend anyone here, but women, they are wired in the way that men are wired to be the center of their own world, but women are wired to be able to make someone else the center of their own world. That's why they're nourishing by nature more than men. So it's easier for a woman to kind of compromise her limits because she wants to, you know, not lose him or make him happy or like show that you love him too and this and that. So once again, if the guy is doing that to you, don't look for another sign. He has already proven to you that he's not in it for the long run. If he's in it for the long run, he won't ask you to do any of those things. Right. No matter how Christian he is, even if he's the pastor's son, even if he's the pastor himself or a minister of God, if those things happen, that is your red flag. You don't need to try to discern or try to interpret what's happening. He does that, he already crossed the barrier and the boundary right there. So that's very important to remember also when you are dating. And we're actually going to talk about dating and holiness here in a little bit, but we're going to just round up our story here. As you know, we got married. I traveled over there several times. She came here. We visited each other. Yeah, exactly, Pastor Vlad. Selfies opens the door. Selfies opens the door. Yeah. Why would you, like, once again, I'm not going to repeat myself, but it is incredibly important. Like, don't do that. Sometimes the guy might not even straight out ask you, but he's hinting at it without saying it, so that he can then get, like, if you know, once everything has gone too far, he kind of like, oh yeah, well, I never asked for that. You just chose to do that. And like try to blame it on the girl or whatever. So as a girl, keep yourself. If he can't stay because you choose to keep yourself, he's not it.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Okay, so that's a little bit of a side note there. So yeah, I traveled there, I met her, she came here, met my parents, I met her parents, and then after talking and dating for about a year, right? Or no, for 9 months before I proposed to you.
Yeah, I mean, like, to be fair, we pretty much from the beginning knew that we wanted to marry each other. I mean, when we had decided that we wanted to become a couple on the day after my brother's wedding. That was sometime in April of 2017. And a month later, when his mom was in the hospital, I mean, we had some really similar things going on, because I forgot to mention that when I came home, about a month after being home, my own mom was got a really serious infection. She almost passed away, and it was really hard on my family, and I ended up being the caretaker for my own mom. And then, like, his mom was going through the cancer that she was going through, so we were actually really just a great support system for each other, and like praying for each other, and just really being there, even just as a friend for what each other was going through. So all that to say, when his mom was in the hospital, and there was uncertainty about whether she was going to live or not. I mean, he told his mom, like, hey, I'm talking to this girl, and I think she's the one. And I remember when he told me that, I was like, you told your mom that I'm the one? And he was like, well, yeah. I mean, this is all through text message. We saved our text messages because we had some really sweet moments, just like super, super sweet conversations about like our life and stuff. So, but I was like, so does that mean that you want to marry me? And he was like, well, yeah. I was like, okay, so should I start like looking for engagement rings? And he said, yes. In 5 seconds, I had sent him like 3 pictures of rings that I really liked. And I just kind of left it at that. And I had this one that was like, I told him, like, this is my favorite one. And I had sent that to him. And so after he came and visited me in August of that year, he came back in October and surprised me on my birthday, and he proposed to me. And the ring that he got me was the one that I had sent him all the way back in May, where I said, this is the one that I really want. And that's the one that he had gotten for me. And it was such a special moment, because I thought, well, there's no way he's going to get me this exact ring, you know? But he really took the time, and he saved up the money to get that ring for me. And I'm not wearing it today, guys, because now that I'm pregnant, my hand is so swollen that I can't fit my ring right now. So a lot of you might be thinking, well, why are you not wearing your ring? Yeah, well, because it's not fitting me at the moment. So hopefully when the swelling starts to go down, it'll fit better. So that's a little funny tidbit right there. But yeah, that was a really special moment for me. And yeah, so we got engaged, like 8 months, I think, into our relationship. And then we had planned to get married. I had already booked our venue in the summer, because I knew, like, here in the Tri-Cities where we live, that it's not easy to get a venue. So I booked our wedding venue 15 months in advance before he even proposed to me. So during that time in May, I was on it. I just
faith.
Yeah, total act of faith. And it ended up being that we decided, okay, we weren't going to get married that year because we were living long distance. We didn't have, it wasn't easy for us to just plan something. I mean, we really had to take the time. And because for me, I was like literally one of the last ones of my friends to get married. We could have just had a really fast, quick wedding and whatnot, but I was of the mindset that, like, I wanted to have the fairy tale wedding. And so I was willing to wait to get it, and we did. And I'm actually, like, super, super glad that we waited, because the date that we chose was 8/18/18, and that was really special to me, because for those of you who don't know, the number 8 in the Bible symbolizes a new beginning. And so that 888 in our wedding date was really important to me, because God speaks to me so often in, like, numbers and dates. All my friends, everybody from church, you know me, this is how the Lord speaks to me. So even just some really funny things. I could go into a lot of details about that, but I'll spare everybody the time. But that was important to me, so I'm really glad that we got to wait, because that was such a special day for us.
Yeah, and also we actually did a poll here on our YouTube channel yesterday to ask what people wanted to hear about. So I just want to really quickly cover, because we're on that stage now where we were dating. So just a couple of tips to you if you're out there dating. Already we give you a couple of red flags for a girl to look at. But when you're dating, and the big problem that we see in Christianity today is basically dating and staying pure. Like those two things are the same. You should date and stay pure. That you're dating doesn't mean that you abandon your purity. And the most important lesson that we learned or that we discovered is that when you're dating, you have to have two people who by themselves desire purity.
Right.
You can't have the lady desires purity, but the guy doesn't really care. Or the guy wants to do it the right way, but the girl doesn't really care. You can't make two broken people, and marriage doesn't fix two broken people and make them into one whole. You have to have two whole people before you start your relationship. If you are not whole by yourself, if you don't have a strong relationship with God, if you are not convinced and convicted in your heart to stay pure, not because that's what my dad and my pastor told me to do and I want to be a good Christian, but because you genuinely love Jesus and your relationship with Jesus is actually more important than your relationship with whoever you are dating, when that takes place in your life, then you are ready to date. Yeah. I believe that Christians, they do this mistake over and over and over again. We're like, oh yeah, we're broken, but let's be broken together, and two halves make a whole and all that. No, marriage doesn't work that way. Marriage is not two halves make a whole. Marriage is two wholes make a whole. Okay, that's how marriage works. So you have to, by yourself, focus on your own personal level of purity, and you have to be convicted and already have overcome. Don't go into a relationship expecting that the person you're dating is going to help you overcome lust. Yeah. And I know this is common, especially in guys. They're like, oh yeah, I struggle with lust, I struggle with masturbation, I struggle with porn and all that. I'm just gonna, and the mindset is basically, you believe that you will replace the porn with your wife. That's not how it works, okay? You can't replace your masturbation and your porn and say like, oh yeah, now I'm married, she will take that place in my life instead of the porn. What kind of life do you expect? You're not marrying, you're marrying someone who has feelings. You're marrying someone who, all of the kind of things that you witness and you experience when you're involved in porn, first of all, it's fake. Life isn't like that. Yeah. It's completely fake. So when you go in and you think, oh, I'm just replacing I'm going to stop watching porn now because I'm dating this godly woman and we want to do it the right way. So I'll just replace my sexual desires from porn with my future wife or whatever. Big no-go. Big no-go. You're going to fail. The only difference is going to be you're going to be a married man struggling with porn. Instead of being a single man. Nothing's gonna change. So you have to personally overcome that first and have a solid grip over your sexual desires to be able to curb it, control it, and have power over it. Sexual desire is something that God created in us as human beings, but it was never meant to run you. You are meant to have control over it. And I think especially for guys, it's so important, because if you go in trying to replace those things, you're going to mess up. And your wife, your girlfriend, your fiancé, she won't fix nothing of that. It will only get worse, because now you're not just offending the Holy Spirit and offending your own body, you're also offending your girlfriend. Yeah. She's going to lose trust in you. She's going to, it's going to damage more and more. The longer you try to contain it and solve it by human means, the more it's going to grow and damage and hurt more people. So very important to remember that when you're dating in holiness. Another thing that I think, at least for me, I think when you put a ring on her finger, guys, don't wait too long. Because once you're engaged, your mind goes, oh yeah, well, she have said yes. And then you start like pushing the boundaries. Let's say that you were dating the right way as a boyfriend and girlfriend. You weren't doing wrong things. You were really staying pure, doing it the right way. But then the moment you put a ring on her, your mind is going to change. Like, oh yeah, not only is she my girlfriend now, she has said, yes, this is my future wife. And like, you easily push the boundaries. It's like, oh yeah, well, we're already, the wedding is already in the books, you know? So the time of being engaged is actually the time that is hardest. It's even harder than boyfriend and girlfriend, at least for Christians. Yeah. Because when you're boyfriend and girlfriend, everyone is like monitoring, like, hey, make sure you do it right. Hey, no kissing. You can hold hands. Don't meet alone. You know, someone has to be there. But when you're engaged, it's like, it's more serious. So don't spend years. Preferably, don't even spend like more than 6 months being engaged and not getting married, okay? Yeah. If that's the case, like you've already decided you're gonna get married, so don't waste time. You know, what is hindering you from doing it fast? If it's like finances or something, maybe you shouldn't put a ring on her if you're not already financially ready to kind of take care of the wedding or whatever. Like plan ahead, and the more you plan ahead, the more you're saving yourself from falling in temptation as well. Do you have any advice regarding that?
I do. So for ladies, so many of the reason why we give in to, sexual immorality is just really mostly because of insecurity. And we feel like we need a man's love to prove our worth, and that if we're not sexually desirable, then we're not desirable at all. But it's really about knowing your value and your identity in Christ, and not allowing those insecurities to govern the way that you go into relationships, and when you're able to think like that and recognize, like, hey, I'm a child of God, I'm a daughter of the King, and I deserve the best, and I know my value, I know my worth, I know who I am, then you'll be able to stand for your purity, and I think that's one of the greatest things that we did, and I feel really honestly proud to say that we saved ourselves for marriage. Both of us did. I'm not going to say that it was easy along the way in different parts of our lives and different seasons, but I'm so grateful for that, because going into the season that we went into after marriage and some of the hardest times of our life, I think one thing that we really had for each other was this deep sense of trust, because we had only known each other, and our connection wasn't divided. And not to say that if people, have sexual relationships before marriage, and I'm not saying that God can't redeem that and give you a new purity, but I can say from our experience, at least, that like for us, that was something that was really important for us. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later, but so many times we as women, we succumb to insecurity because we feel like we need to be, that the only way to be desirable is, not for our minds, but for our bodies. And that's just not true. You can be desirable for who you are, and your mind and your relationship with God and what you bring to the table, and really force the man to understand that you are more than your body. And I think the right man will automatically recognize that and see that. And I really felt that with Rikhard. I think I felt really valued by him for who I was, and he loved my mind and my heart. Like whenever he would compliment me, it was rarely physical, even though like he complimented me physically, but like it was always about my heart. He would always tell me, he's like, the thing I love most about you is your heart. I love the way that you think. I love the way that you are towards other people, and so that was, I think, a really big green flag for me, in our relationship. But I'll never regret that we waited. And for us, we were engaged for 10 months, but in all fairness, for us, we spent most of that time apart in a long distance relationship. And so I think distance definitely makes it easier to stay pure. And because we had a lot of logistical things that we had to figure out too, in planning our wedding and everything like that. So there's that. But yeah.
Yeah. And people are mentioning in the chat right now, of course, the importance of deliverance before getting married. Of course, we had both received deliverance prior. Yes. So if you're a Christian, you go to church and you're like, oh yeah, this is the woman I want to get married to. This is the man I want to get married to. Don't of course, push them to go for deliverance. But once again, 2 holes make 1 hole. Yeah. Focus on yourself. Go and get delivered yourself. go and work on your habits, work on developing holiness, work on developing intimacy with Jesus Christ, and get delivered. And if your partner also does that, you don't need to be like, hey, you're not delivered, go and get delivered. You are demonized or whatever. Like, no, focus on yourself always. And if your partner doesn't understand that, then they need to understand the importance of deliverance as part of it as well. And if they don't want it, that's another one. I mean, it's pretty darn important to go through deliverance, because basically what deliverance does is it washes you clean again. So if you have been involved in different kind of sexual immorality prior, deliverance and going through the prayers of repentance and all those kind of things, it actually washes you clean again, so that you are like a virgin before God again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's about the dating. And then of course we tied the knot, we got married, I moved over here, and we lived a life together here for a year. Started, of course, you have been going to Hungry Generation. You bleed Hungry Gen. You've been there since the beginning, basically. I joined as well. I got straight into the vision, the mission of the church. I plugged in. I got connected. I felt a sense of purpose, and that this is where God had called me. And we were serving in our church here, Hungry Generation, for a year. And then, of course, the big crash happened that many of you may know about, where I went to Canada to do something, and when I was coming back to USA, I was refused entry, and I had to go back to Sweden. And we had been married for a year by then, and
we had just barely hit our 1 year
anniversary.
I mean, we had that year was such an interesting year in 2019, because we had celebrated our 1 year anniversary. The next week we were ordained as pastors, and then the week after that my husband was denied entry into the United States, and that was really the beginning of the trial. I mean the tribulation. Let me say it like that. I preached a message 2 weeks ago where I talked about stuff like this, and that for us was really the beginning of that time of tribulation.
Yeah. So what happened after that was that for 3 years I was exiled in Sweden. My wife was here in America. She was working on her career. I was over there. I kind of had to change career. I had to move, change everything. I was sleeping on my parents' couch for almost a year. Yeah. And we had no clue of how long it would take. It ended up taking 3 years, right? 2 years and
2 years and 8 months.
2 years and 8 months we were apart, and I was in Sweden. And we want to share with you really quickly here some of the really hard things that we faced in that time. Yeah. So we were apart. She was here. She would come and visit me as often as she could, but it was basically like going back to dating again, where we were having a long distance relationship, except we were married. Okay. Yeah. And I can tell you, as a man, that was the hardest time of my life, because one of the very tough things, I think for men in general, but for me, like, I was missing the intimacy, the physical intimacy with my wife like crazy. So
well, and can I like pause right there for a second, because I know people are probably wondering, oh, well, Brittany, why didn't you just move to Sweden during that time? Like, why didn't I just go there and stay there? Well, there were so many factors that made that really difficult for us to do. Number one, what people didn't know is that right at that time we were in the process of buying a house. So we had already put money down on a house. We were about, just a month or two away from closing on our house. Like, I had a job here. When he went back to Sweden, we didn't know what sort of financial means we would have. So our original plan was that, like, okay, first of all, we were praying that God would turn it around and a miracle would happen and he'd get to come home really fast. And we were really oblivious. And looking back now, I can't believe we ever thought that was going to happen. But I mean, God can do miracles. But we were in a point that we were unable to make any quick decisions, because our life had just been flipped upside down, and so there were so many loose ends here in the United States that absolutely need to be tied before I could reasonably go over there. Number two, in Sweden, and like what he mentioned, he was sleeping on his parents' couch for a year pretty much. And so while he was there, I mean, before I could reasonably go there, and us have our lives there, we would have had to cancel our house. I would have had to quit my job. He would have had to find a job right away in Sweden, and we would have had to find an apartment. I mean, sure, we could have done all of those things, but we had chosen certain decisions in our life because our ultimate goal was that we knew we wanted to build our lives here in the United States, and we didn't want to just drop everything that we had already worked so hard to build. And so we were trying to be really smart about decisions that we were making, and knowing that some of those decisions were going to be a sacrifice, because in the end, we ultimately believed that God would bring Rikhard back here. So at the time, they were really tough decisions to make. But today, we're so glad that we didn't get rid of our house, because we have a house to live in today. We have, we're grateful for that, for our home. We're grateful that I didn't just leave my job, because throughout those 3 years, God blessed us enormously, especially in the area of my career, and that allowed us to even have any kind of semblance of a comfortable life today, because we opted to take the harder road. We recognize that, but we chose that because we believed deep down in our hearts that God was going to make this work out for us, that God would bring Rikhard home, that no matter how hard it would be, that God would ultimately lead us back to where we knew we belonged. So yeah, I mean, that's why I didn't just drop everything and move to Sweden. Could it have worked out? Absolutely, but this was the path that we chose because we had the future in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and once again, we didn't know from the beginning how long it would take.
Right.
If we knew that it was gonna be 2 years and 8 months, we probably would have done some things differently.
A little differently. Our lawyer had told us that the maximum amount of time that it will take was 18 months.
Yeah, a year and a half. So it was like a year extra on top of that. And that's the maximum amount. So when you experience hardship, what happens in your mind is that naturally you're hoping and praying for the easiest way out. You're hoping and praying that something will miraculously happen. They say that the last thing that ever leaves a person's mind and a person is their hope. Mm-hmm. People will hope on death row. People will hope until they close their eyes that something is going to happen, that their life will be spared. Right. Your hope is the last thing that will ever leave you as a human being. And it was the same for us. So sometimes you have to balance your hope with your reality. And it's really hard because when you're experiencing hardship, especially when you're going through a marital wilderness like we were doing, you hope for one thing. You hope that your partner will come out better. You hope that your partner will receive Jesus. You hope that the partner will stop being abusive. You hope that you will understand each other. You hope that you will get a child one day. You hope all these things. But if you base your whole life on your hope, I'm not saying the hope we have in Jesus Christ is different, the hope of salvation. But when you're hoping for greater things and you kind of neglect the reality, once reality catches up with you, it will actually hit you harder. Yeah. So a healthy dose of reality together with hope of a brighter future is, I think, the most sound path to take when you're going through hard things. And it's really hard because I think during this period, you were the more hopeful and I was the more real one. Like I was... in the beginning, I mean, not that I wasn't hopeful, but like after a year, I was like, yeah, it's probably going to take years. And my wife was like, no, don't say that. It's not going to take long. And I'm like, yeah, well, the thing is, if it does, at least I'm prepared mentally for it. If it doesn't, good. But like, I rather plan kind of for it to take long. And then if it goes faster, thank God. But if you're hoping and you use your hope as a gauge for your plans, once reality hits, if it does, it will be really tough to get yourself together again. So that's one of the things that we really learned as well, is a healthy dose of reality isn't necessarily that, oh, you're a Debbie Downer because you think this is going to take long. No, a healthy dose of it. I'm saying you can go over the top and become like a super negative person because you'll be like, oh, this will never change. My husband will never change. My wife will never change, or whatever. Like, no, you're being a little bit too realistic to where it's turning into negativity instead, skepticism.
I think I want to add to that too.
Yeah.
I really feel like for us, that's where we learned how different we were, and we were just like wired differently, and that's okay, and it's very normal. It's we handled things differently just because we're different people. I tend to be more on the optimistic and hopeful side. I really follow that scripture where it says hope deferred makes the heart sick. So I always held on to hope because that was what got me through, and I would remind myself of all the good things that God had done. And Rikhard was more on like the real side. Like, I know God can do this. It's not that I don't believe, but also, let me not live in a fairy tale land either, that I can't expect that everything in my life is going to be perfect. And so I think we ultimately agreed, but our way of viewing it was different. And that's what we really learned about each other during this time. I mean, and maybe we can go into some of that too, because we learned so much about each other. We realized that we were really on the same page, but we just were viewing the page from different angles, And so I think those are really important things that in our marriage that we feel like we had to really fast forward and learn in a really quick and condensed and intense sort of a way about each other and our personalities and our habits and the way that we view life.
Yeah, and we're gonna go ahead and share a couple of our hardest learned lessons during these times. First of all, we're gonna share 3 things each that were the toughest with going through this marital wilderness. I call it a marital wilderness. And maybe you can relate with that today. Maybe you're going through a marital wilderness where you guys don't talk the way you used to do. You don't communicate anymore. Maybe your wife is never wanting to have those deep talks, or maybe your husband isn't wanting to have those deep talks, or you don't agree, you don't see face to face, you're unequally yoked, or you're experiencing some kind of a marital wilderness where fights or separation, disconnect. We had a physical and also an emotional disconnect.
Yeah.
Because of the situation. You don't have to have a physical disconnect to have an emotional disconnect. Many marriages today, they are physically in proximity. They are next to each other, they're close to each other, they live under the same house, and they even have physical intimacy, but the emotional disconnect can still be there. So whatever kind of disconnect that you're facing in your marriage today, remember that wilderness season that you're going through will only be for a season, but you need to work through it. You need to put in effort when you're in the wilderness to work on your marriage. And the best way, in my opinion, the best way for you to work on your marriage is working on yourself. If both partners in a marriage who is under reconstruction or renovation both work on reconstructing themselves and becoming better version of themselves, together once again, you're getting the purpose of 2 wholes making 1 whole, and not having 2 broken people trying to like substitute it, like, oh yeah, this person is really gets a hot temper, so I have to balance that out by being a really cool-tempered person. Like, no, let him work on his temper and you work on your temper. You can't try to like substitute or kind of cover up or fix his problems by making changes that will adjust to that. You have to become a better version of yourself. He or she becomes a better version of themselves, and that is how you work on your marriage, by working on yourself. So we're gonna share the 3 hardest things first of all from that disconnect that we had. For me, and this is kind of like a little bit of like the elephant in the room, not many people ask me about this, and I'm actually surprised. When people ask like, oh, well, how was this during your marriage, and how was this during when you were apart from each other? And people don't ask this question. Like, maybe they're scared to ask. Maybe they're scared that they'll hear something that they don't want to hear. They're like, what? Or whatever.
I mean, the things that even we're going to share today are really intimate. I mean, they're just the honest truth. And our goal is to just be transparent because, if anyone can learn from what we've been through, like, we're willing to be transparent about those things because we're not we're not sitting here under, living under a rock and pretending like, everything in our life was perfect. And even though we went through hardship, that we handled it perfectly. No, like we went through hardship, and I mean, we really had to fight to come out of it, So I think that it doesn't matter how much of a man of God or a woman of God or strong Christian you are. I mean, when you are put to the test, I mean, the fire will remove those impurities, or expose them at the very least, So our plan is to be transparent and let you know, like, what were the hardest parts for us.
Yeah. And so for me, the absolute hardest part of being apart from my wife for long periods at a time was the physical intimacy. Okay? Physical intimacy, sexual intimacy as a husband and a wife. There is a reason why the Bible says that a husband and a wife shouldn't be apart for long periods except for prayer and fasting. And after fasting is done, get back together again. So that's the first sign to know that what happened to us wasn't the will of God, okay? It was an attack, because God doesn't let you go through things that are against His word. God will not put you through things that are against His word. If the word of God says a husband and a wife shouldn't be apart,
right,
and situations make you be apart, no, that was not God's will, because
Absolutely.
God will not put you through things that go against His word.
Yeah.
That's the best thing to gauge. Like, oh, is this God is teaching me a lesson? No, the Bible never says that God lets you be sick to learn a lesson.
Right.
The Bible says that God wants you healed. His will is for you to be healed. That means that sickness isn't the will of God. God never puts us through things that goes against His own word. So for me, the sexual intimacy, the physical intimacy was really hard. At times, we were apart for like 7 months. It was really hard for me as a guy.
Yeah.
And trust me, like, it's easy to say that, yeah, well, you were a virgin when you got married, so you can you should be able to, yeah. But once again, once you taste the good fruits, you know the flavor of it, you know the taste of it, and it gets harder. Okay,
Right.
guys? So I'm being really honest and open here. This was one of the hardest things that I dealt with. And trust me, if you're a guy and you're struggling, let's say maybe you have been involved sexually prior to your relationship. Now you want to do it right, but because you have tasted the fruit before, you're struggling more. You can overcome that with the power of Jesus Christ. There is no reason to say like, oh yeah, I'm so... I'm weak in this area, I need it, or I need so bad just right now, I need sexual intimacy with my wife, I need intimacy or whatever. Like, there is no excuses for you as a man. And I'm talking once again to you as a guy right now. I can't talk to ladies, but as a guy, you cannot put that on your wife, like, oh, it's your responsibility to make sure that I don't fall into porn because it's been like, no, it doesn't work that way, dude. It's your responsibility not to fall into porn, whether your wife is there or not. It's your responsibility not to fall into these different kind of loopholes that the devil will try to use to entangle you and pull you in. It's your responsibility. It's not your wife. Mm-hmm. You can never blame your wife and say, like, well, she's not there for me, and therefore that's why I'm online flirting with people or whatever. No!
Right. And like even that, like, our circumstances, we didn't choose that. We didn't choose for what happened to us or to be apart, So the temptation could be, well, we can make some compromises because we didn't do this to ourselves. No, like, we are each responsible for the Bible says we're responsible to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling, and knowing, okay, what does God have to say about this and whatnot. So I think that is also really important to understand as well when it comes to even your purity in marriage.
Yeah. And I think, once again, it comes back to how you start and everything. But if you started wrong, there is hope.
Yeah.
And I think one of the important things is that you can't blame your wife for not understanding you, or blame your wife for not being there for you emotionally, physically, whatever it may be. It's your responsibility. And this is a big one also, because guys, it's not easy as a guy to be open about these things with your wife, because we're guys. We don't talk about, today I feel like a butterfly, today I feel a little, like, no, that's a girl thing to do. Guys, we're like, I'll just get through it. I don't need to talk. I'll just handle it. I'll just carry this load. I can do it. But it's very important for you, if you do that, and the thoughts of blaming your wife for what you for lack of intimacy or whatever, you will continuously, that seed, that thought, it will grow in your mind, it will fester, and it will infect every part of you. If you try to carry it and you don't communicate. So my point is, don't blame your wife, but communicate. Communication is key. As a guy, as a husband, you have to be able to be vulnerable and be like, hey, hey, darling, I'm having this, I'm feeling this way, I'm struggling with this is my battle right now, and be open with her. Don't be like, oh, hey, babe, I watched porn because you didn't do what I asked you yesterday. That's not how to do it. Okay? How to do it is like, hey, this is my struggle right now. I'm having, let's say that your desires are taking you through the roof for whatever reason, because first of all, as a Christian husband, man, and father, you should be able to control those things and grow in your maturity to where those things are enslaved by you and you not enslaved by them. But let's say you find yourself in a situation where you're struggling immensely. Take it to your wife before, not after, and don't take it blaming. Take it to her and explain your struggle. Actually, it builds trust when you do. Your wife will be like, oh, wow, okay. Rather than being like trying to blame or whatever. So it's very important. Communicate about your desires, your feelings, your emotions, and what's going on. Don't blame, don't try to, sidetrack, don't hold it, don't carry it, just share it.
Yeah, I think too, in that sense, like for us in those 3 years, I mean, we would talk about it. I mean, it wasn't something that we would just shy away from, and we would talk about it. Even though when we were apart, there was nothing we could do, but at least in talking about it, he wasn't internalizing that. I knew what I needed to pray for him during that time, and we would try to find other ways to connect. I mean, like we would, play games with each other on our phones and find other ways to connect.
Yeah, you learned chess during that time.
I learned how to play chess, and we would play online chess with each other. We would do Scrabble online together, just ways to connect, because for him, the hardest part was not having that physical intimacy. And the hardest part for me was not having the emotional intimacy, because, as a woman, we're wired differently. I mean, before we really feel like anything sexual, we have to first be fulfilled emotionally, so and that long distance and the time difference. I mean, I think this is a huge issue. We had such a time difference that we were rarely on the same page. We had 2 hours in a date that were like our 2 good hours. It would be 1 hour in the morning, early in the morning, because I used to like to wake up really early, and then 1 hour before I'd go to bed. And those were like our 2 good hours in the day during the week when I was having to work and he was having to work, because our schedules just didn't align. And so we lost a lot of emotional intimacy. So we had to work really hard when we weren't together. That saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder. Yes, that's true. But I also think that sometimes absence makes the heart grow bitter, because when you know what you could have and what you should have and what is supposed to be yours and you can't have it, it's frustrating, and it's easy to get bitter with your partner and think, well, you're not doing this for me, or you're not doing that for me. Well, in a marriage, it's a symbiotic relationship. I need emotional intimacy, and that inspires sexual intimacy. But for him, he needs sexual intimacy, which inspires emotional intimacy. So it's symbiotic. So we constantly had that disconnect. So we had to find other ways to cultivate relationships. So one of the things that we did was try to come back to our roots, come back to the beginning of our dating relationship. What did we love about each other? Well, what we loved about each other is we could connect on so many levels. And so we would just talk. And when we were dating, I mean, we could be talking either on the phone, through text message, or on FaceTime, or just whatever throughout the day for hours and hours. And so that's kind of how we would do it, is we would just connect throughout the day through text message, talk on the phone when we could, FaceTime when we could, and we would find things that we loved together. We loved playing games, so we would play chess. We would do that. One of the things that we started doing was we started praying together on the phone. That was how we would get through those hard times. And I'd wake up in the morning and we'd pray together in the morning, and then we'd pray together, for me what was the nighttime, but was for him when he woke up. So we prayed with each other in each other's respective mornings. So we started the day with each other in prayer, and we ended the day with each other in prayer, and praying for our situation and asking God to give us opportunities to connect. And so that emotional and sexual intimacy for each other of us, there wasn't any good solution. Just to be totally frank, there wasn't. So we had to rely on our trust for each other, on our love for each other, and our relationship with God, for God to come and just fill that void that we were having, that belonged in our marriage, that was robbed from us. Mm-hmm. And so what else do? You only can trust in God at that point. You have to put your faith in God that I'm drained in this area. My husband cannot fulfill this for me right now. And or for me in this case, I could not fulfill his desires. So we had to trust in God, and we did. And that was ultimately like we got stronger with each other. We talked about the problems. I mean, they were tough conversations, but I think it brought us closer together, because then when we were together, we were so much more understanding of each other's needs, and even so much of what he does for me today. And now that we're together, the way that he connects and takes care of me, in my emotions is as a result of those things that we learned during this time. So I think that those, for number one, for each of us, probably our most difficult things mm-hmm. that we had to go through. What would you say is number two? I think we have the same one.
Yeah. So let's do this. We're going to talk about the second hardest thing here, and then we're going to go ahead and go on to some lessons, so that we can also touch on some of these things before, because we've been going already for an hour and a half. Thank you guys so much, all of you who are joining us here today. This is incredibly good to have you here. We are really happy to have you. We have about 150 people watching right now on YouTube. We have 116 likes. If you could just help us to like this stream, if you're watching us on YouTube, it helps us so that more people can tune in and find out about these marriage tips. Please like it if you're enjoying this content. We appreciate you doing that. God bless you as you're doing that. Also, before we go on, I want to take a really quick poll here. I'm going to see if I can engage this poll here. Just a quick breather to connect with you guys here before we continue sharing. I want to see right now, just for us to get an idea of how many people are watching us from the different continents right now, mm-hmm. I'm gonna launch a poll, and I'm gonna ask you, what continent are you watching us from right now? So I'm gonna show on the screen how to vote. Let me see if I can see it here. This is how you vote, guys. It's on the screen right now. I think you can see it right in the middle of the screen between our heads. That's how you vote, and I'm starting the poll right now. Let me see here. 1 second here, guys, and we're gonna get this poll going. There we go. The poll has started. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can vote right now. I'm gonna show it on the screen as well here. You see that everything is working. Oh, there it is. You can vote right now. Which continent are you watching us from? Write it in the chat. We want to know where people are watching us from right now. Mostly, what is the continent that people is watching us from the most? Okay, we got people voting from Europe, America, and Africa. Once again, if you have something else, let me see if I can extend it here. The last one doesn't show, but the last one is other. If you have any other continent that you're from, like Australia, Australasia, for example. Australia, or yeah. It's called Australasia, I've heard.
No, it's Australia.
Yeah, maybe you're probably right. I'm gonna extend it here to see if we can. So we got a couple of minutes left here to vote. Let's see here, guys. We appreciate you joining in to vote, to let us see where you are watching us from right now. There we have the whole thing right now. Let's see, we have another 2 minutes to vote. We have mostly people from Africa and Europe here right now. So look at the screen, guys. Look at the screen right here. This is how you have to write it. Where is my fingers? Here. This is how to write it to vote. Exclamation point, vote America. Exclamation point, vote Europe. Vote Africa. Vote Asia. You see it right there. Yeah. If you write it any other way, it's not gonna count. Yeah, Martin is saying Oceania. That's what it's called, Oceania. 1 minute left, guys. Please vote. People, you are not voting properly. Fahamuni and Amanda, look at the screen how you have to vote. You have to do exclamation vote America, exclamation vote Europe, vote Africa, vote Asia. You see it. There we go. Yokwana got it properly. Casey got it properly. Thank you very much for sharing. Shion Ogundipe, no space between the exclamation point and the word vote. So it has to be precise. 1 minute left, guys. 1 minute left in the chat. We have mostly people from Africa. Come on. People from Europe. Vote, guys. Vote. People from America, vote. We have only a few people watching us from Asia. I'm from Europe. She's from America.
We lived in Africa.
And we lived in Africa. Wow, come on. Yeah, okay, let's see here. We got 35 seconds left. 35 seconds left, guys. Let's see who is gonna win. Let's see who is gonna win.
Yeah, we just
20 seconds left.
We appreciate knowing where people are watching from too, you know, especially for those of you folks that it's, you know, 9 hours ahead of time. And we really understand that burden a lot. That was our lives for 3 years. So thank you guys for taking the time to, you know, get on here and join us.
10 seconds left. 7, 6. Looks like Africa is gonna win, guys. And that is it. The vote is over. Vote has been closed. You can no longer vote, guys. If you missed it, you missed it. So we got Africa is our most watched continent on this show. Somebody. Thank you very much for joining us. God bless you. Got some, there we go. We got some spam in the chat too. Thank you very much for watching. That was a little bit of a fun thing. We just wanted to share with you before we continue talking here, because it can get kind of long and you're watching and you're getting like, I don't know. Is anyone tired? I hope not. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and continue here right now. Thank you guys for sharing. We actually appreciate that. It's good to know that majority of the people that are watching us is actually watching us from Africa, and secondly most from Europe. That is why we chose this time of the day also. Yeah. That's why we do it in the morning here in America. This is not the most comfortable time for people in America to watch this thing. It's morning. This is when you're doing lunchtime and so on. But in Europe and in Africa, it's a better time. So it's good for us to know. So we're going to jump straight in, guys. Thank you very much for doing that. Once again, if you just tuned in, if you're watching, help us by liking this stream. We appreciate so much that you are doing that. And yeah, okay, we're gonna go ahead and share the second greatest lesson that we experienced, and this is the same for both of us.
The greatest lesson or the hardship? I think we're in the hardship part.
Oh yeah, the greatest, the hardest thing, the second hardest thing that we experienced during this marital wilderness that we experienced, and kind of like how we handle it a little bit too. And it's the same for both of us.
Yeah.
We filled out this list separately to kind of know what we're gonna talk about today, and we both wrote the second hardest thing that we went through is not knowing or not being able to know what the future holds.
And not being able to plan.
Not being able to plan what the future holds, you know. So basically when I came to Sweden, I could have gotten a car, I could have gotten an apartment, I could have tried to get a really good job, but because we thought that it was gonna be short time, what happened was that we couldn't plan. We were basically hanging in limbo for a long time. So that was one of the hardest things for us, both of us, and we both experienced it differently. Yeah. You experienced it over here, not knowing what the future held, and I experienced it over there. For me, I mean, just the physical strain was really hard. I was sleeping on a couch. I had no privacy. I couldn't even get my parents lived in an apartment. I was sleeping in the couch in the living room. My room where I lived was my parents' living room. And I mean, people hang out in the living room. People watch TV and stuff. So I had no privacy, and I often thought like, maybe if I planned, I could have even gone to school if I planned. I could have gotten like a 2-year degree in something, if we knew that that's how long it would take. Because guess what? School in Sweden is technically, basically free.
Right, yeah.
So I could have gotten an education, but because I can't do that, let's say, we got approved and I have to come back to USA, I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to finish my education. So not being able to plan was really hard. And maybe that's you today, because you can't make plans because, you're not on the same page with your wife, maybe physically or emotionally, spiritually, whatever. You're struggling in the middle of like the limbo. You can't make any consistent plans for the future.
Right.
We understand. It is hard. It's incredibly hard. And the only way that you can really go through such a period, in my opinion, this is how I handled it at least, is to simply endure. You can't necessarily fix waiting periods. Now, once again, if we knew the time, we would have done things differently. But one of the main things that you have to learn to develop patience when you're going through wilderness. Maybe you're going through a wilderness in your health. Maybe you're not going through a wilderness in your marriage like what we were doing, but you're going through some kind of a wilderness spiritually or emotionally or whatever you may be going through in your career. You're in a wilderness. Developing endurance is going to help you to stand through the wilderness.
Yeah.
Everything is a season. It will not last forever. But sometimes it will be very prolonged periods where you're like, oh man, and you just want to give up. Maybe some days you do give up. Jesus never gives up on you. Remember that. So develop endurance. Just endure it. There is no shortcut to like, how to endure it nicely or how to not have pain during endurance. No.
Yeah, it's like what the Bible
painful.
says in Ephesians chapter 6, when you've done all that you can, stand. That's all you can do when you're in that season, when you've literally done all that you can. I mean, coming back to what Rikhard said, like we didn't have any concept of a timeline. Our lawyer had told us it would take about 18 months, and the first portion of everything, when we went to his first interview at the embassy in Sweden, at that point it had taken, I think it was 14 months. So we were already like 4 months, everything was speeded up by 4 months. So we were like, yes, thank you, Jesus. This happened 4 months faster than it was supposed to. We did not go in there thinking that he was going to get denied. So that threw a huge wrench in our plans. I mean, we bought our tickets home for Christmas. I mean, we were like ecstatic. We're coming home for Christmas. We were finally going to be able to plan. And then when he got denied, I mean, the waiting time for a waiver at that point was 3 to 6 months. Well, it took us, 16 or another 18 more months. The waiver process took us longer than the original immigration process, the consular processing. So we felt like we were constantly in a state of the unknown. And so when we say, like, on my end, it was hard to plan because we wanted to say, okay, well, this is when we're going to start having kids, or this is when, we're going to plan for this portion of our life. But we really couldn't do that. I mean, and I think for me, especially in the second half of this process, my heart really just got like really heavy. I mean, I was feeling like, God, are we going to be able to start a family? I mean, I just had those questions like, is this in the books for us? Like, is this written in our life story to have a family? I'm like, I feel like it is. God, I feel like you have this for us. But like, man, the way that things are looking now, I mean, we don't know when this is going to end. It should have been 3 to 6 months, and then 3 to 6 months turned into another year and a half. And so like, we had to put so much of our life on hold. And it was like, well, do I just pack my bags and move to Sweden? Well, what if it only took, another month or two to get the answers that we needed, and then I quit my job, and then I had nothing to come home to? And so it was like, we felt like every day we were kind of just like playing it by ear almost. And so, and I think that was so difficult for us, we just had to trust God every day for the answers and to make the right decisions. And I don't know that we made every decision perfectly, but I can say this at least, that we did our absolute best to make every single decision with God, and willing to take the harder road, knowing that like in the long run things were going to work out better for us. And now, I mean, now that we're here, now that we're on the other side, we're so thankful. Like I said earlier, we're so thankful that we didn't sell our home. We're so thankful that I didn't just leave my job, you know, because throughout this process, I mean, I got promoted several times, and I've been able to grow in that area, and through the hardship, this is how Rikhard even started this YouTube channel. You know, if not for those hard times, I don't know that even this YouTube channel would exist. So I believe that God makes all things work together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purposes, as it says in Romans 8:28. And we really held on to that, and we trusted that. So even though we couldn't make plans, we trusted that God was laying out the foundation of the plans for our lives in a way that we couldn't have organized it. We couldn't have made the path straight. Only God could do that. So we really had to just trust God. Back to that scripture in Ephesians chapter 6, when you've done all that you can, simply stand and trust God that he's fighting your battles, that he's the one who is organizing and orchestrating your life together, that even though you may be facing deep hardship, you can trust that God is working all of the details together for you. And your job is to be faithful to God, faithful to trusting him in everything that you do. Don't let the enemy steal your relationship with God and steal that intimacy that you had with God because of disappointment. You will be disappointed in life because this world is not our home. We don't belong here. This is not the promised land for us. Our promise is heaven. Our hope is in heaven. But we do believe that even in this life on earth, that you can experience a beautiful life. And a beautiful life isn't something that is not a life without hardship. A beautiful life is being able to endure through the hardships and seeing the blessing on the other side. Just like when a seed is planted into the ground, it has to die before it can grow and become something beautiful. So we believe that beautiful things come from brokenness. Beautiful things can come from darkness, you know, because only God can do that. Only God can make that transformation. So even though we couldn't plan for ourselves, we were trusting that God was planning our best lives for us. And now
So
we're grateful for that. I mean, we're so happy. We're, you know, here we are today. We're reaping the benefit of that waiting. We're glad that we waited, you know, before trying to have children, because now we're more stable. Our feet are on solid ground, and we're going to be able to bring a child into this world in a much more stable situation, you know, instead of dragging this child through the hellfire that we were going through. We decided to endure that first so that we could be strong and stable and trust that God was going to get us there, and that it was never going to be too late, that God's time is best. Even though it was hard for us, it was hard for me in particular, because I felt like, well, man, I'm getting older by the day, you know, what if I'm not able to have kids? I mean, these are all the thoughts that it's easy to think about, you know, and the enemy will put in your mind, but we just trusted, like, that's not going to be our portion, that God is going to work things out for us. And so we're just grateful because now we can confidently stand here and know that this is the right time for us.
Exactly. And guys, we have been going for an hour and 38 minutes, and we've got people who have asked questions during the stream and even yesterday. So we're gonna go ahead and jump on over to, is that okay with you, to jump over to our Q&A session?
We'll have to do a part 2.
We have to do a part 2 because there's a lot of lessons that we aren't even able to share with you yet. I have so much stuff written down here. We have barely gotten through half of it. But because of time, we want to jump into the Q&A right now. We're going to answer these questions and questions that people have asked during the stream. So I'm going to take us and jump us over right now to our Q&A. Look at this, guys. Tell me what you think. Does this look good? Come on, look at that. Just chatting. This is our Q&A place where we're it's actually playing music in the background for them, like lounge music and everything, and people can see our chat and everything. So we are in the Q&A part now. We're gonna be hanging out with you guys, answering questions from the chat. Thank you so much for all of you who have tuned in and stuff. This is the time. So we've got a question here. The first one is, how do you know when it's the one? How do you find the one that God has for you? Do you want to go ahead, or should I go ahead and start off on that one?
I mean, we talked about this answer prior to this live stream, and we both agreed that to find the one is not about necessarily finding the right person, but being in the right time. Because we truly believe that the right time will bring the right person. Because the right person in the wrong time is still the wrong person. Because if you are not ready to engage in a mature, godly relationship, your own immaturity will destroy something beautiful. And so the right time is always more important, because in the right time, God will bring that right person, because it's important for you to also be the right person. And one of the things that I prayed for, prior to dating was like, God, help me to get rid of generational curses and all of the baggage that I'm coming with in my life before I meet my husband. Because the thing that I've like journals with this written in here hundreds of times, that together with my husband, I want to start a new generational blessing. I don't want our kids to have to enter into this life with these different generational curses that we came into life with, and because we knew better, we need to do better, and so that was kind of our mindset. And I believe this with all of my heart, and I know my husband does too, that in the right time, God will bring the right person, and you need to also be the right person.
Yeah. So basically what we're saying is, if you find the person that you feel like God is telling you that, oh, I want to marry this person, but it's the wrong time, that's going to mean if you marry the right person in the wrong time, it's still going to be the wrong person in a sense, because you have to wait for the right time. The right time brings the right person. I love it. It's actually, I learned that from Prophet T.B. Joshua when he was preaching. He said the right time brings the right person. I had someone recently who I was counseling. We were calling up some people who had testimonies from our prayer line, and this person said that, oh, the person is getting so of age now, and they haven't gotten married yet, and they're wondering when is the right person gonna show up. They don't even know how they will ever get married. And I was like, how old are you? And the person said, I'm 21. It's like, at the age of 21, and you're basically like panicking that you're not married yet. I married when I was 30.
Yeah,
You've got 9 years on me, okay?
I was almost 29.
Yeah, so understand it, whether you're a man or a woman. I know that men, they are more relaxed when it comes to that than women, but even men, both, especially if you're a Christian, growing up in a Christian church, people are so in hurry to get married. They will be like, oh, I'm 21, I'm not yet married, and I need prayer. Like, what do you need prayer for again? To get married? Probably, maybe you need to still mature in some areas of your life and like get a bigger understanding of how life works before getting married, so that you can kind of, overcome those weaknesses that you may have due to immaturity. So be patient. Be patient. And another thing that I think is really important, stop focusing on who that right person is. Like, you go into a church and like, oh yeah, it's probably him or her. Like, let's say if you're a guy and you're like, oh, her or her or her. Who is it? Who is it, God? Speak to me. And then you have a dream and you see one of them in your dream. You're like, yep, that's it. I saw this girl in my dream. You're my wife. Instead of focusing on who is the right one, focusing on what qualities the right one has.
Yeah.
Like, what are the qualities of the right person in my life? Like, okay, the most important thing. And once again, as a young person, if your number 1, 2, or 3 qualities are anything related to physical appearance, recalibrate. recalibrate. It's important to have an attraction for your future wife or husband, but if your number one priority is that they look good, or they have a certain curvature or formation of their body, or green eyes, blue eyes, blonde hair, brown hair, this ethnicity or this size of whatever part of their body, you are missing the point. Why? Bodies change. Minds and hearts doesn't to the same. Yes, our heart changes, but not, our hearts doesn't deteriorate like our bodies do. Yeah. So you cannot focus on the physical feature. It's important, don't get me wrong, it's important, but it's not the main thing. Focus on the heart and the qualities of what the right person would have. All right, so that's one question. Another question that people had asked: how do you handle growing in ministry together? How do you handle growing in ministry together? And one of the things that I think is very important when you talk about growing in ministry is to actually give each other space to grow. Mm-hmm. You want to grow in ministry together, but if you're like not, you're trying to kind of tell someone how to grow, or you want them to grow but only in one direction. Like, oh, I want my wife to grow in preaching so that we can preach together. Let's just use that as an example. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to like mentor your wife to learn to preach. Like you're actually limiting growth. Maybe your wife or husband isn't called to preach. Maybe you are. And that's okay. You don't have to be identical twin copies of each other in terms of ministry. My wife has a certain ministry and certain things that God has put on her heart. I have certain things that God has put on my heart. And many of those things align somewhere down the road, but they may not align from the beginning. So you have to give space for your partner to grow by themselves. Mm-hmm. There are many people who one of the partners is full-time ministry and the other is deep in business or something. Right. And that, whether it's the husband or the wife or the other way around, that's not what is most important. Like, oh, the husband must be the breadwinner. Like, yeah, I get that. But if the husband's calling is a particular direction and the wife's calling is a particular direction, give space to grow. And that is how both you will see what they're called for and also they will see what they're called for. Because sometimes we don't know what God wants to use us for 100%. Mm-hmm.
I think what I can add to that too is that it started for us with being aligned with what we had in our hearts even from the beginning. I mean, the reason why we connected so deeply in our dating relationship is because we both wanted the same things in ministry. We desired very similar things, and so we both had, a passion for people in ministry, specifically deliverance. I mean, those, like, we wanted that together, and we pursued those things together. And yeah, we pursue them a little bit differently because we have different personalities. We do things differently. Like, I am my own person, he is his own person, but we want the same things. And so I think that's what makes us really strong together and why we love ministering together, because we understand each other. Like, I think that's one thing that's kind of unique about us, is that like we understand each other when it comes to ministering together. We're pretty in tune to like what each other needs, or where each other's comfort is at, or where the areas that we want to grow. And someone asked in the chat, and I want to address this. They asked if I'm in full-time ministry or if I still have a job. Our ultimate goal is that we would love to both be in full-time ministry. But right now in this season of our life, just to be totally transparent, financially, we're not able to do that. So yes, I have a full-time job. I mean, I have a full-time job in education, and I've been in that field for 17, 18 years, and I've been really blessed in that, and I've been able to grow and promote throughout my career. So I actually do have a really thriving career, but is that my ultimate heart? I mean, I love what I do, and I'm so grateful to God for what I get to do in my work, because it's its own type of ministry. But ultimately, I think that our goal is that in time, when God brings that time into fruition for us, we would love to be serving in full-time ministry together. That's our ultimate goal. But currently, I am still working And it's important that I continue to work at this point in time. So, but that's part of our understanding with each other, is that I also understand the calling upon my husband's life. I know the calling upon my own life, but where we're at in life right now, there are decisions that you make together as a couple in order to see each other thrive, you know? And I know that like my husband has an amazing call of God upon his life. And so it's important to me as a wife to nurture that, and not just nurture, but believe in him and believe that God is doing something amazing. And so it's my honor, you know, it's my honor to serve alongside of him. It's my honor to, like, yeah, I may still have to work a full-time job, but it's my honor to do so, because that allows my husband to be able to serve in ministry and to serve all of you people. You know, it allows us to be able to give of ourselves completely in this area. I mean, and it's an honor to do so. I'm happy that I'm able to make such a decision in life, you know, to be able to do that, because it was our desire from the beginning that we want to serve people. We want to serve the kingdom of God. And so part of that is really understanding the ebb and flow of life. You know, not every single ministry is going to be, you know, the husband and wife doing everything together. Eventually we want that. We would like that. But this is the season of life that we're in right now, you know, in order to make that happen. And so it's my honor to serve my husband in the ministry that God has called him into. And I know that one day soon, you know, in the future, that we'll be able to do that together.
Amen. Awesome. One more question here. We have a couple of questions left to answer, but one question we really want to ask or answer is a question that many people have been asking us, both since yesterday and even during the stream today, is how do you overcome differences in marriage? And this is a super big one, okay? How to overcome differences in marriage. And this is a big one. We're going to take a couple of minutes here because this is really good. I think one of the most important things on how to overcome differences in marriage is, first of all, to always fight legally, okay? You will fight. If we are going to pretend that we don't fight in our marriage, literally we fight. Sometimes like cat and mouse. And that's normal. It's normal to have arguments and fight. We don't fight physically.
Yeah, not that way, you guys.
We don't fight physically, but we have some really heated arguments sometimes. And it's very important. So what we're going to share here today, remember that every marriage is unique. You can't just take the tips that we say, you can't just take that and emulate that exactly, try to duplicate what we are saying here, because your marriage may be different from ours. Our marriage, first of all, we have two very strong-headed people who are married here.
What? No, just kidding. Yeah, we're both very headstrong. One of the ways that I can describe it is that, and what I'm about to say, this is not a bad thing. It's just who we are. We're both very alpha type figures, and not in a way of like, oh, we have to be on top and whatnot, but we're natural leaders in our own circles or in our own realms. And so when you've got two people who have that alpha dominance kind of a, you know, attitude or mindset, you know, it does pose for some challenges. So this is where we have to learn to compromise with each other. And I think in the beginning we had a much harder time with that, because we both felt so strongly in our opinions of things, or the way that we viewed life and the way things that should be. So we had to learn how to fight fairly, or like what Rikhard said, fight legally, like not you know, not pull any illegal moves or you know. And we say that because we have also fought very wrongly before. And you know, in the beginning of our marriage, we were like, well, we're never gonna fight. We love each other so much, you know. And
we're gonna be the couple that doesn't fight.
Yeah, and then we were in our first year of marriage, and you know, we fought about the typical things that everyone fights about: money, time, how we spend our time, things like that. And what's funny is that, like, when he says that we would get in heated arguments, I mean, like, he's not joking. I mean, it would get pretty heated. And there was this one situation that I can remember, and it, like, we were in our apartment at the time, and it was before our world crashed in front of us. So it was in our first year of marriage, and we were fighting with each other. Don't even remember. It was very likely about money. And and I was in the kitchen, he was sitting in the dining room, and we were just fighting and literally screaming at each other. And then as we're yelling and trying to have this like serious battle with each other of like, I'm right, you're wrong, you know, and expressing ourselves at the top of our lungs, something happened and we both just started laughing hysterically at each other. I mean, we were in the middle of this most intense fight, but we were just like laughing ridiculously because we really realized how ridiculous our fight was. And like, why are we getting so upset over such a menial issue? And so, I mean, not to say that later on, I mean, especially some of those times when we were living in Sweden, and times were really hard. I mean, we really suffered some really hard things. I mean, we were sleeping on floors in offices, and it was a tough time for us, you know? And so in our marriage, we really had to overcome, we're not even sharing all of the deep and hard things that we went through during those 3 years, but, you know, we learned how each other fights and our personalities. And I see Edward, thank you for this question, Ed. Did your cultural differences impact your relationship and especially arguments? And I would say yes, for sure. And even our way that we grew up too.
Yeah, maybe even more than only cultural differences. You can come even from the same country and you have, like, cultural differences is one thing, but then you have family differences.
Yeah.
How you grow up, how your father treated your mother, how your mother treated your father, and things that you teach, that you learn from your mother's milk, whether it be cultural or more generational.
Yeah.
The differences definitely impact your relationship. And I think it's very important to give grace when you are experiencing these kind of things. Like, we had the most ridiculous things where, like, many times I would feel like she doesn't understand, like during the time when we were apart, for example, I would feel many times like she doesn't understand what I'm going through. Like, she's suffering too, but like in my mind, I was always thinking like, she's suffering, but I am suffering 2.0.
Yeah.
I am suffering more than her. The toil that I'm experiencing is bigger than hers.
Yeah.
So I needed constantly to have, and why would I even say that I'm suffering more than you? It's because I wanted her to recognize that. And for example, once again, we are very different. My primary love language is words of affirmation. Your primary love language is quality time. Words of affirmation is pretty easy to do on the phone. Quality time is a little bit harder because on the phone it's hard to have quality time at all.
Yeah.
It's like I'm on the phone, so I can't put my phone down. You know, it's like, and sometimes it would be like super early in the morning for one of us, and one of us has to brush their teeth, eat breakfast, and get ready and all that. And the other person is like, hey, spend time with me. I'm about to go to bed. Can't we just talk for 30 minutes? Like, no, actually we can't.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So for me, I would always like send her text message and be like, I love you, like, because I'm a words of affirmation kind of a person. Yeah. To her, like that of course, it means something, but what means more to her is me spending undivided time with her, which honestly, it was hard. Yeah. And then what happens is, when one of you don't get your love tank filled up, you won't care about the other person's love tank either to the same degree. Because it's basically like kind of like a hierarchy of needs or whatever, where first of all, if you are filled up, you can share to others. Okay, when you feel content, you don't have problem pouring into others. But when you are hungry, you're not gonna think about sharing your food with someone else, right? It's primal instinct. It's like survival instinct. So the same emotionally goes. If your love tank is empty, your primary concern is not gonna be your partner's love tank. It's gonna be for you to feel better.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like it's like instinct. I'm not saying that we deliberately are selfish by nature, but kind of, yeah, we are. So what happens is that one person's love tank is getting low, and that makes the other person's love tank go low, and like in our case, for example, and I'm gonna be super transparent. I felt like I was more like communicating than you in some regards to that. Like sometimes you didn't necessarily like communicate like, hey, my love tank is low right now. You would communicate it in other ways, you know, but not necessarily
like more nonverbal.
Yeah,
usually.
more nonverbal, because once again, your way of expressing yourself isn't the words. I mean, you're a talker for sure, but like
but when it comes to like my emotions and how I'm feeling, I have a harder time saying that, because I think for me personally, I always felt a little bit guilty that I felt that way, you know, because I knew that the situation we were in was not something, my husband didn't put this on me. I didn't put this on him. We didn't do this on purpose to each other. It was just what we were living. And so I kind of felt guilty for feeling the way that I had felt. So I had a harder time expressing that. And so my expression came out a lot more nonverbal, but Rikhard was way more verbal in his expression, and he's more intense than I am. In general, you can probably tell, like even in our live stream today, in terms of our energy, like I think we match each other's energy pretty well, but he's more intense than I am. So you can imagine, like even in our fights, who's the more intense one. And then, but I'm so headstrong that like even when we would fight and he'd get really intense, you know, before I back down, I would like get up to his level too. Like, okay, if you're going to get that intense, I'm going to get that intense, but I can't last that long because it's not natural for me. Whereas for him, it's a lot more natural, you know, it comes easy for him, you know? And so I think something for us where we learned along the way, and in the many, many fights that we had over almost always the same thing, financially, I mean, like, let's just be honest here. It was a very tough time for us. You know, we're still overcoming a lot of the hardships that we went through during that time. I mean, you can imagine how much of a financial burden it was to go through consular processing and having to hire a lawyer and doing all of that stuff. It was hard for us. We were living in 2 different countries, and we were so fortunate that we had people who were really helping us and blessing us. I mean, if not for the kindness of our family and our friends and our church family, I mean, we would be in a much worse place than we are now, you know. So in all transparency, I mean, that was always a difficult thing for us. So, but like when we would fight about these things, you know, it started getting to a point where we began to recognize, okay, he's a little more intense. I can actually come into a situation and be more calm, you know? And that would actually frustrate him, because here he is getting intense, and I'm just like, why do we have to fight like this? Like, can we just talk to each other like normal human beings? And that would really irritate him too, because it's like, what are you doing? You know, it's an argument. And then on top of that too, we began to, we started changing. Our fights began changing as we matured and realized we love each other so much. The only reason why we're so fired up is because we have so much love for each other. I think a dangerous thing is when you no longer fight and when it doesn't matter to you anymore. And so we never saw our fights as like anything scary or a sign that something was going wrong. We always understood that because we were still fighting, there was still so much fire and love there, you know, and a spark, you know.
And also remember, like, if you know that going into an argument or a fight, that both you and your husband or you and your wife are gonna fight legally, you won't be scared to take the fight either. I'm not saying that you should go around looking for fights, but it's very important, like, you don't deal low blows no matter what. Words like never and always shouldn't be used when you're fighting. You never do this. You always say that. Like, don't use those words because, first of all, statistically, it's impossible to never pick up your socks. Statistically, it's impossible to always say that or behave like that. Like, it's not true. So what you're doing is you're projecting negativity onto your partner, and it's a low blow. So stay away from those kind of things.
Yeah.
Secondly, when you're expressing something, don't say, you don't care about me.
Yeah.
Or you have to say, I feel like you don't care about me. Okay?
Yeah, or like, I feel like I'm not being cared for.
Yeah.
And not like placing the blame on the other person. It's just, this is how I feel. I'm not, my needs are not being met, you know? And even as we went through some really intense moments in our life and even in the different fights that we've had, we learned each other so much, and to the point where, like, even when if we even start kind of getting into an argument, we kind of know, okay, don't touch on this point, like that's it's irrelevant, you know,
like the past, like something that someone did. Like, oh, you know, let's say you had a girlfriend or a boyfriend before, and like you've already been through that and you have apologized, or let's say that you did something really bad, whatever it may be, and you have already settled that in the past. If you bring that back up, that's another low blow. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
That's illegal when you're fighting. Like, fighting is okay, but you gotta fight legally. If you don't fight legally, the fights will eventually turn into something else. And this is another thing I want to share some light on. Your fights, when you choose to fight illegally, which means that you're dealing low blows, you're breaking the barriers, the rules of fighting in your marriage, or arguing, or going through differences and so on. Your fights will shift gear, and they will turn into an open door for demonic presence. Yeah. When you begin to fight just for the sake of fighting, when you're losing the purpose of why you're even arguing, and like, oh yeah, I barely remember why we're fighting, but now everything he says or she says just annoys me, and I'm gonna keep poking at it. I'm gonna keep poking, and you break the rules. That becomes an open door to a spirit of division, a spirit of disunity in the family, in the marriage. And suddenly, because of your fights, you actually are inviting demons into your house. I'm not saying that a demon will enter just because you're fighting illegally, but if you consistently, all the time, break the rules, consequences happen, okay? The rules that are how to not offend your partner. Like, I've offended you, I've hurt your feelings many times, you hurt my feelings, but like, and we in the beginning we were fighting illegally. I'm just gonna say, we were saying stuff all the time, and raising your voice too much. I did that. I've raised my voice way too much as a man, like, because as a man, when you get to a certain point and like you get so frustrated, and it's like, this is it, you can raise your voice and like be like, no, by physical authority, I say right now, this is it, stop, you know, whatever. Like, you shouldn't raise your voice past what the rules of marriage entails, and when you do that, you can open up doors for demonic presence in your life. And you, most of the time, you can actually sense when a fight shifts gear and it becomes demonic. You can actually sense it. Trust me, most of us, actually, if you're married here today, you've probably been in a fight or an argument with your husband and your wife where you sensed like the change, where like, oh man, this is demonic right now. Holy man, why am I so unreasonable and angry? But like, it's gone too far already. You allow your emotions to get the best of you. And when you sense that demonic shift, you have to cut it off. Even before then, you know, don't go to that point, but you have to stop that. That can actually become an open door for a spirit of rejection, spirit of violence, a spirit of lust, spirit of disunity, lying, cheating, all that kind of stuff. It can open up to it. So you gotta fight legally. God never said that a husband and wife cannot argue or have disagreement or fighting, but fight legally.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, that you have to learn this stuff. I mean, for anybody to go into marriage thinking that they're not going to have any of these problems, you're in in an illusion. You know, like we kind of thought that we're like, no, we're not gonna fight. We have so much love for each other and we understand each other. No, you're gonna learn things about your partner that you're like, wow, I never knew that, or I did not recognize that in you when we were dating, you know. But the thing is that when you have God at the center of your relationship, you're gonna go through those hard things and you're gonna learn how to deal with them together. And so now I'm grateful to say that we're at a point that when we're fighting, I mean, we really don't raise our voices anymore. We fight, we bring arguments like, this is how I feel. You know, when this is happening, I just need you to understand. I don't need you to tell me your side of things or give me an excuse. I just need you to know that this is how I feel, and whatever you do with that, that's up to you. So we often go through things like that, or it's like, he's someone that needs immediate closure. I'm a processor. So I might need us to kind of press pause for, you know, a half an hour, you know, whereas like he wants to have the closure, like he can't handle that half an hour that I need. But because we've both recognized that, we kind of have found kind of some compromises where it's like, okay, we agree, like where we have a disagreement, or there's just something that like we can't get over. We agree that I love you. I need just a few minutes. I need some time. Like, let me process what's going on, because I get to a point where I almost can't communicate anymore, because I need to process in my mind what's happening and what am I actually thinking and feeling right now before I can verbally say it out loud. Where he is more of that communicator in the sense of he's ready to say sorry right away, but when I say sorry, I need to know what I'm saying sorry for. And that's just how I am. That's how I'm wired. That's how he's wired. And so he knows that I need time to process, and he gives me that time. And I know that he needs closure right away, so I try not to take too much time. You know, we're not perfect at it, but it is something that we've gotten so much better about. And so now, kind of like I said, we settle a lot faster. We rarely ever raise our voices anymore. And because we've gone through hell and back together, we understand, like, we don't want to sit in this argument because we've already experienced being apart from each other, and we hate that. Mm-hmm. So we find ways to settle as quickly as possible because we enjoy each other's presence, and we love each other so much that we don't want to sit in that discomfort forever. You know, we don't sweep things under the rug. We deal with stuff. But sometimes we recognize maybe we should deal with this later. We don't have to solve this world problem today. Mm-hmm. And we can get along with each other and move forward in this moment, you know, and settle things slowly as we move on. So good. So guys, we're actually gonna start rounding up, and we've been going for 2 hours and 10 minutes. One final question here. Someone is asking, what's in your marriage something that made a big difference? Praying together, studying the Bible together, or something else? And yes, praying together is very important, but also praying for each other privately. Mm-hmm. I believe that there's no greater way that I express my love for someone than to pray for them. I pray for my wife on my own. Mm-hmm. When I'm praying, I pray for my wife, and we also pray together. We did that when we were apart, pray together on FaceTime and so on and so forth. And you have to pray together, do morning devotions together, and have a spiritual culture where you develop that atmosphere in your home, and also praying for each other. That will help you to like when you pray for someone, you fill yourself up with grace for that person as you're doing that. Yeah. So we're gonna round up here, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're gonna have a second one. There were so many questions and comments that people have sent. We weren't able to answer all of them, but we want to thank you once again. If you want to support what we're doing here on the chat, you can do a donation on YouTube. You can sign up as a partner on YouTube, as a partner on Moonclerk. All the links are in the description below. Support the work that we're doing here. Next week, I'm gonna do a YouTube episode on secrets from the SCOAN.
I'm gonna share an episode on secrets from SCOAN. You don't want to miss it. It's gonna be live next week, but we will definitely do another one, babe, a part 2 in the future, maybe 2 weeks from now or so, of where we share more lessons and stuff like that, because I think it's very necessary.
Yeah, I think we really only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, we had planned to get really transparent on some of our struggle that we went through in those 3 years. So we still have a lot more to share, but I mean, I think this is a good place to end it today with the general overview of what we went through together, and you know, and what we continue to learn about each other each day. You know, so definitely part 2 is on its way.
Part 2 will come, yeah. So once again, guys, thank you all for joining. Check out our merch. You see my t-shirt here. I designed this t-shirt myself. Jesus, my Savior. The merch shop, theDeliveranceShop.com. And check out, you can go to Linktree /Deliverance Podcast, or you can go to www.thedeliverancepodcast.com. We have our website now. You can find out how to connect with us. If you have questions, connect with us on social media. Support the work that we're doing here. If you join us as a partner on YouTube, a monthly partner, you get access to deliverance training that we upload every week to our own deliverance team. So that's a perk for you there. Other than that, God bless you guys. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you've learned something. Share this with your husband or your wife if they need to hear it. Share it with someone who is dating, someone who needs to get to hear how to date in purity. And yeah, from me and Brittany, we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.